Good morning and welcome to Rising. Happy Friday. I'm Amber Duke, joined by Niall Stanage at the desk today. Niall, good to be back with you.
Good to see you. Always
Absolutely.
Great to have you here on a Friday, Amber. Always a pleasure.
I know, it's like a nice little signal before the weekend.
Exactly. It's getting people into that weekend mood with a bit of debate.
Exactly. But we have a lot of news to cover today, of course, with the transition team. Just hours after Matt Gaetz withdrew himself for Attorney General, President-elect Donald Trump named a new candidate, one of his steadfast allies, Pam Bondi. Trump made the announcement on Truth Social, posting, quote, "For too long, the partisan Department of Justice has been weaponized against me and other Republicans. Not anymore. Pam will refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose of fighting crime and making America safe again. I have known Pam for many years. She is smart and tough and is an America First fighter who will do a terrific job as Attorney General." Bondi served as a senior advisor on his first impeachment defense team. She was also among a group of Republicans who showed up to support Trump at his New York hush money criminal trial. Her Trump-proof credentials extend to her tenure as AG for Florida, where she was the chief challenger of various Obama-era policies like the Affordable Care Act. She also defended the state's ban on same-sex marriage.
Bondi is already getting the GOP's blessing on Capitol Hill. South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham posted on X, quote, "Picking Pam Bondi for Attorney General is a grand slam, touchdown, hole-in-one, ace, hat-trick, slam dunk, Olympic gold medal pick." So he probably likes her. He went on, "She will be confirmed quickly because she deserves to be confirmed quickly." GOP Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt posted, quote, "Congrats to my friend Pam Bondi. She'll be an incredible Attorney General. Great choice, President Trump." So far, no Democrats have spoken out on her behalf, but Bondi will likely face smooth sailing on account of that Republican support in the Senate. But then there's the next problem, Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary. The former Fox News host was nominated last week, but serious allegations of sexual abuse could upend his nomination. Here's GOP North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer on Hegseth.
Pretty big problem given that we have we have a sexual assault problem in our military that a number of us, and certainly the champions being Kirsten Gillibrand and Joni Ernst, but I've been on board with them and in support of the legislation to deal with it since the chain of command was not. I'm not going to prejudge them, but it's a pretty concerning accusation.
Republican from North Carolina Tom Tillis and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal also weighed in on the pick.
Let's see the full report. Let's understand the context and also understand from the prosecutor who chose not to move forward with it, why.
Not just about the vetting process in particular. Don't you think the Trump team should have done a better vetting job?
Well, the more you do up front, the less you have to do on the back end.
I think this nomination is doomed. It should never have been made. It was never vetted.
Hegseth met with senators Thursday. He was surrounded by reporters where he said this.
President of the United States, for this amazing, humbling opportunity to be nominated to lead the Department of Defense. It's an incredible opportunity that I do not take lightly. I just want to thank the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, who spent the morning with me, meeting with senators of the United States. We take very seriously the advice and consent role that the U.S. Senate has. We look forward to engaging in that process. We take absolutely nothing for granted, and we welcome the opportunity to talk to any senator that wants to talk to us.
Did you sexually assault a woman in Monterey, California?
I have, as far as the media is concerned, I'll keep this very simple. The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Thank you very much.
How do you address concerns about your lack of Pentagon experience? Do you believe you should testify?
So, quite a lot to talk about here, Amber. We could start with Pete Hegseth, perhaps, who faces this allegation of sexual assault. There were no charges pressed in that matter. He denies any wrongdoing. His lawyer implies that essentially the woman who is accusing him was seeking to cover up a consensual encounter from her husband. She's married. That said, obviously it comes in the light of the Matt Gaetz matter. Those should be disconnected as a political reality. They're probably connected to in some shape or form. And now we have police reports into the Hegseth matter becoming public. It's not a great look, certainly, but I mean, how damaging do you think it is?
Yeah, I don't think it will be super damaging just based on the details that are in the report. Obviously, it's an unnecessary and unwanted distraction for the Republicans, and certainly for Trump, who is making unconventional picks and doesn't want the unconventional picks to be because of whatever personal compromise might be lobbied against them, as opposed to the fact that they maybe are bringing in creative ideas for how to run their departments. But again, I think the details in the report, when you actually read it, are not that damaging. The woman did wait 4 days to go to get a rape kit. It doesn't say in the report what the results were of that rape kit, but we do know that the police declined to pursue the case. There was a surveillance video that they found of them talking outside by the pool and her kind of leading him by the arm. Witnesses saying that she seemed like she was kind of stable and fine, whereas Pete Hegseth was the one that was actually quite intoxicated. So it almost suggests to me that she could have been the aggressor in the situation, and then, as you said, maybe had regrets. I mean, he talked about in his encounter with the police, talking about the incident, that she seemed immediately regretful of the incident, was planning on telling her husband that she had fallen asleep in one of her friend's hotel rooms, and then 4 days later decided to go accuse him of sexual assault. So I just don't think the details really lend themselves to the reaction from some of those senators.
Yeah, you know, I don't love he said, she said stories about something so serious,
Right.
because then we from the outside are looking at things and sort of making our own judgments, which frankly may or may not be true. She does, I believe, claim that she said no during whatever took place, and she appears to suggest that there may have been something slipped in her drink. Now, we don't know really any of the truth of any of this. All we know is that the police declined to prosecute. I noticed that Hegseth's attorney is saying the police viewed it as a false allegation. That's not explicitly stated in the report, and obviously there is a spectrum between we don't fancy our chances of getting a conviction on this, and this is a false allegation. Those two things are not necessarily the same thing. I do wonder, is there some political damage by virtue of these nominees getting bogged down in these stories when Trump himself has the history of having been found liable for sexual abuse in the civil trial with E. Jean Carroll, and when it brings up the general topic of treatment of women?
No, I don't really think so. I mean, there were a lot of issues with the E. Jean Carroll trial as well. I mean, start with the fact that she claimed that she still had the dress that she was wearing on the day, and the dress wasn't even manufactured until years after. There were some weird comments she made about people finding rape sexy and general inconsistencies in her story, where I was actually very surprised that that trial ended the way that it did because of those issues. But
sorry, not to,
yeah,
but I
no,
mean,
please.
it did end in a jury of regular American jury members finding the former president liable.
And it was a really weird determination that they made, because they said that they found him liable of sexual abuse of some kind, but not of the rape, which was her chief complaint. So yeah, I mean, that case to me was just bizarre all around.
Pam Bondi, the supplanting person following Matt Gaetz's withdrawal, clearly another Trump loyalist, served as Florida Attorney General for some time. There are some ethical questions around her that we'll get to in a second, but what did you think of that choice?
I think it's a fine choice. I mean, she seems like someone who has generally a similar posture towards the Department of Justice as Matt Gaetz, but obviously doesn't have this ethics investigation, has actually served in an attorney general position at the state level, and has a lot of prosecutorial experience and experience arguing in front of high courts. So I think people are right to be excited about the pick. I don't know as much, though, I will say, about her underlying ideology in terms of how aligned is she with America First movement, how much does she want to sort of blow up the DOJ as Matt Gaetz did. Those things I'm not sure about.
You don't think that she's as much... People who defended Gaetz defended him on the grounds that he was a disruptor.
I don't think she's as much of a disruptor. She'd probably be like 50% of the way to Gaetz if we're like on a spectrum of like Merrick Garland to Matt Gaetz. She's probably like somewhere in the middle.
Half disrupting. So look, as I'm sitting in the non-conservative seat, I better make the case against Pam Bondi, which includes the fact that there were questions asked back in 2013 whenever several states were investigating Trump University for fraud, and she was the Attorney General of Florida at the time. Her office was looking at joining that case, and there was a $25,000 contribution from, he wasn't yet president, of course, from Donald Trump to her super PAC, after which she decided that her office would not join the case against Trump University. To your point separately about her being a disruptor, after she left as Attorney General, she worked as a lobbyist and represented the interests of places like Amazon, General Motors and Uber, and she was also a registered lobbyist for the nation of Qatar.
Yeah, so I'd love to jump in here because one of the concerns that I do have is about her antitrust, her position on antitrust. And that background you're talking about obviously raises red flags for how she might approach corporations and corporate power. And that was one of the complaints I saw from progressives on social media about the pick too. So I'd love to get your further take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, anytime there's always this suspicion that people who join up with Trump as disruptors, to use our phrase of the day, are using it as a sort of flag of convenience to cover up what are completely standard business interests. And just the fact that she did work as a lobbyist of, the type of person of whom the swamp was supposed to be getting drained last time around, and I don't think that causes Trump or anyone else any pause at all. I think that is, that seems to cut against the message or suggest there's a certain amount of opportunism going on in those sort of claims, I think.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anyway, we will have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this. Stay with us. More evidence emerged this week in the case of Daniel Penny, the Marine veteran charged in the 2023 choking death of a homeless black man on the New York City subway. For context, then 24-year-old Penny was on his way home from college when Jordan Neely, a homeless man with documented mental health issues, entered the same subway car that Penny was on. According to witnesses, Neely began shouting, and some of the threatening quotes attributed to him include, "I'm going to kill you." Penny then intervened. He put Neely in a chokehold for more than 6 minutes. Neely was pronounced dead at the scene. Penny, who was arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter and negligent homicide, faces 15 years behind bars, and he pled not guilty.
The trial began in October, and this week the defense team brought in a forensic pathologist who testified in court that the evidence doesn't support the chokehold being the cause of death. Last week, prosecutors presented the jurors with video of police interrogating Penny. Let's take a look at some of that.
I was on there. I forget what stop it was at, but some guy came in. He's like, whipped his jacket off, and he's like, "I'm gonna kill everybody. I can go to prison forever. I don't care. I don't do this." At that point, I looked to the person next to me like, "Hey, just hang on to this phone for me." I had my headphones in and took it off, and just kind of like grabbed him from behind because he came in, just to because he was acting like a lunatic, like a crazy person. So, and he was rolling around on the floor, and at that point the train stopped. I was like, "Someone call the cops," and he's still like rolling around, still going crazy. Had two other guys kind of help me, just kind of keep him from going nuts, and yeah, that's when you guys came.
Joining us now to discuss further is Olivia Reingold, reporter for the Free Press, who first obtained this video of the interrogation. Olivia, thank you for joining us. Let's start right there with the interrogation video. My understanding is that this was actually put into the record from the prosecution as opposed to the defense. What is your read on that? I saw you said on X that the prosecution was probably thinking this was going to help them, help their case with showing Daniel Penny talking about the incident, but perhaps they miscalculated because in this video he does seem to be talking about trying to protect fellow passengers from Jordan Neely.
So I think that the prosecution was thinking here that because there are a few instances in which Penny does describe what he did, I think he uses this quote, something like, "I put him out," something like that, where there are words that he uses to describe the force that he used. And so I think that that is the prosecution's motive here in why they're interested in it. But what they fail to realize is that just as many people watch this video and they see a hero who protected a train full of people.
I mean, Perhaps they do, Olivia. I mean, I think obviously there are two separate issues here. There is the narrative around this case, of which, as you've noted, there are two separate narratives, and then there is the question of Daniel Penny's criminal culpability or otherwise, and he has his day in court there. I'm just legitimately curious, and it's not intended as a sort of a gotcha question, but you know, whenever you were writing about the interrogation in the Free Press, you talk about what part of what we've just seen, and you say that Penny waives his rights to an attorney and remains silent, ostensibly because he thinks he has nothing to hide. But then the questions begin, and they're not about Neely, a schizophrenic with a long arrest record. They're about him. Him, of course, being Daniel Penny. I mean, Jordan Neely, although Daniel Penny didn't realise it, was dead at that point, and he was dead following Daniel Penny putting him in a chokehold. So why wouldn't they? I mean, if I put someone in a chokehold and I knew that person had been injured and they were actually dead, I would expect the questions to be about my conduct. I wouldn't expect the questions to be about the background of the person that I just killed.
Right. I do understand that. An important caveat is that Daniel Penny did not know that Jordan Neely had died at that point. So at this point in the timeline, Jordan Neely has been transported to a nearby hospital. The police have not informed him that Jordan Neely has died. But obviously, you know, Jordan Neely goes unconscious, and Daniel Penny surely is aware of that much. When I was writing that, I'm really writing it from the perspective of Daniel Penny, because you can see the two dueling narratives that are at the heart of this case in that video, where Daniel Penny, he clearly, you know, comes in thinking he's a witness to this man. He describes him as a lunatic who was, quote, threatening people. Witnesses have corroborated that they were terrified. But Daniel Penny clearly thinks that he's coming in as a good Samaritan, a witness, and that's probably why he waives his Miranda rights. But really what I wanted to write about is you kind of see him starting to realize, whoa, these questions I'm getting are not that of a witness. They are more that of a suspect. And so his entire life, you can kind of see him realize it's kind of him realizing what you just said. And that, of course, is that what you just asked me kind of is the heart of this case, is whether or not Daniel Penny should be held liable for intervening in rising lawlessness, whether or not he can be faulted for doing the job that some people think police should have been there to do in the first place.
Let's dig in a little bit further into what actually killed Jordan Neely, because that has been another question at the heart of this case. One of the bombshell revelations was that he did still have a pulse, reportedly, when he was recovered by EMS after this chokehold incident. And then there's been speculation, I don't know how much of this has come out in the trial, please illuminate us, as to his past medical history, as well as this potentially being some kind of drug-induced episode, which could have led to cardiac arrest. Talk to us about what's been going on in the trial related to Jordan Neely's actual death.
So it actually has almost gotten kind of metaphysical at times in the trial about, like, what is death? How do you even know the precise moment that someone did die? Because it actually is quite hard to pin down when Jordan Neely actually died. But the medical examiner testified and did have an explanation as to why paramedics were able to find a pulse when they first arrived. And the medical examiner, who was a witness for the prosecution, she claimed that that is normal, that if you die of asphyxiation, that it can continue to pump for, a couple minutes. And so she said that paramedics were able to find a weak pulse, but that he was still dead or dying at that time, if that makes sense. So that is how the prosecution feels. But on the other hand, the defense, presented thousands of pages of medical records from Jordan Neely that just show, how troubled and tragic his life was. He had a long history of K2 abuse and actually, walked into multiple emergency rooms at times because he had ingested so much K2. We've been learning throughout this trial, I didn't know a lot about K2. It's a synthetic form of marijuana, but experts have testified that the impact is more like cocaine. It's more like a stimulant. And so anyway, Jordan Neely, the medical examiner, did say that once the full toxicology reports came back, which he did not wait for to declare his reason for death, by the way, but that the full toxicology reports did reveal that he was likely high on K2 when this altercation happened. And so there's that. There's also the fact that he has sickle cell trait and was likely in what's called a sickling state when this occurred. And so the defense at least believes that, this confluence of things, the fact that he's schizophrenic and could have been having a psychotic break, the fact that he was on K2 at the time and in a sickling state, which can impact your ability to process and, distribute oxygen throughout your body. The defense believes that it's not the chokehold that killed him. And they put forth a forensic expert yesterday who actually testified that.
Olivia, just to finally sort of go to the big picture in all of this, I suppose, like your reporting, which, to be clear, extends beyond the interrogation video, and you've written about this case before. On one hand, I take the point that there's a whole context and a whole narrative to this, and certainly, Jordan Neely had a very tragic life in many ways, and his mother was murdered, and he testified at a murder trial of her boyfriend and all of that. And there are absolutely really serious questions about whether the mental health system failed him and all the rest of it. I suppose, though, on the philosophical level, what I worry about sometimes when there's such attention paid on whether he was a drug user or on whether he had a history of threatening people, is that if we start down that road, aren't we giving citizens the right to manhandle other citizens, or in this case leading to the man's death, and then sort of retrospectively say, well, it matters less because the person they killed had other issues? Like, that's the danger to me, that it creates leeway for forms of vigilantism, basically.
I do understand that perspective, but at the same time, I think that's what supporters of Daniel Penny would say, is that they don't take issue with the fact that he had schizophrenia or was abusing K2. I think they take issue with the fact that witnesses have described him as dangerous and that, he was threatening. And so it's really the behavior. It's not to stigmatize anything he was going through, because as you pointed out, he led an incredibly tragic life. It's heartbreaking what happened to his mother. He had to witness this horrible, horrible trial. And so it's not to downplay that. But there, at the same time, there is no denying that witnesses in saying, like, a homeless man stumbles onto a train and people are like, ew, yucky, like, oh my gosh, this is so uncomfortable. It's more an immediate sense of danger. I would say that the other thing I think is, like, why should we live in a world in which we expect this to happen again? I think the idea here, and so that are not having a psychotic break in public. So anyway, I guess I would just reframe it and say, I do understand why you would be concerned about, civilians taking matters into their own hands, but I don't think that these situations should be playing out in the open. I mean, I just took notes. So just this week in New York City,
Olivia,
a tourist was stabbed in broad daylight on the Upper West Side.
We're encountering some technical difficulties, I think, with your audio. I'm not sure if that's on your end or our end, but given, the sensitivity of the topic, and I don't want to misrepresent you or to miss any crucial points, it's been a great conversation, and we appreciate you joining us. And thanks for all your insights, and we'll leave it there.
Thank you so much for having me.
Surprise, surprise, the world's wealthiest person, Elon Musk, is feuding again with the third richest person, Jeff Bezos. And this time, it's over comments Bezos allegedly made about Trump.
Tesla and SpaceX founder Musk is claiming, without evidence, that Amazon founder Bezos was saying President-elect Trump would lose the election. Writing on X, quote, "Just learned tonight at Mar-a-Lago that Jeff Bezos was telling everyone that real Donald Trump would lose for sure, so they should sell all their Tesla and SpaceX stock."
Bezos quickly clapped back, replying on Musk's platform X, "Nope, 100% not true." Musk did not disclose who told him about the supposed comments, but quickly retreated on the self-waged battle, responding, "Well then, I stand corrected," with a laughing emoji at the end.
Bezos and Musk have a long and storied history of feuding with each other, most notably over the Forbes billionaire list in 2021. But there's a bigger rift between them, and that concerns their rival space race companies, Blue Origin and, of course, SpaceX. So, is Musk trying to keep Jeff Bezos away from the upcoming Trump administration?
It sure seems that way.
Right?
I would be kind of surprised if Jeff Bezos was running around telling people that he didn't believe Trump was going to win, considering the fact that he had the Washington Post forgo an endorsement of Kamala Harris. He was saying some pretty measured things about Donald Trump in the lead up to the election, which you wouldn't expect considering those two had kind of their own feud during the first administration, with Trump often tweeting about the Bezos Washington Post and how much he hated the paper and how terrible of a job Jeff Bezos was doing running it. So I got the sense ahead of the election, and I think we actually talked about this in several segments, that he was actually hedging his bets in the event that Trump was going to win.
Yeah, no, it very much seemed that way. I mean, certainly in relation to the Washington Post, if he had wanted to just cease giving endorsements, the time to announce that was a long time before the election, ideally before even the Republican nominee had been formally anointed. By leaving it as late as he did, he made it seem very much that he was trying to, if not curry favor with Trump, at least avoid alienating him in the event of a win. I guess the bigger point here, Amber, which you kind of alluded to, is the fact that both of these guys have enormous business interests at stake through contracts that come through the federal government. And you mentioned about how during the first Trump administration, there was the aggro, the back and forth between Trump and Bezos, particularly on Trump's social media accounts. But then there was the other issue where there was a massive contract, I believe worth many billions, about cloud computing. And Amazon and Microsoft ended up being the two, as it were, final contenders. And it went to Microsoft, and there was some suggestion of, like, was that payback for the Washington Post and Bezos and being the common owner, of course, with Amazon and the Washington Post. So, where my sort of worries are beyond what is the amusing jabbing between Musk and Bezos is the kind of clientelism of it, or the vested business interests that are at stake here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And obviously Elon Musk is trying to prevent Bezos to an extent of cozying up to Trump after their previous acrimonious relationship, whereas Bezos is trying to, especially through the Washington Post, send the signal that he's open for business. In addition to preventing the Washington Post from issuing an endorsement, he's also been talking about how they need to hire more conservatives to the editorial team or to the opinion pages, and how their coverage.
It's your big chance, Amber. What do you think?
I'll join the Washington Post when Jennifer Rubin makes good on her promise to resign, because I remember when the Los Angeles Times did not endorse, she was praising the people who resigned in protest and said that it was the only moral action that they could take.
Right.
But she's been oddly silent since the Washington Post didn't endorse.
That was quite amusing. We discussed her yesterday, but there were a lot of people going, "Your turn," after she had taken the high-minded stance of saying other people in other companies should resign, and she did not. Anyway, I interrupted your thought, I think, which was about trying to make the Washington Post more conservative.
Oh, yeah, and it's obviously a business-based decision. I don't think anyone believes that Jeff Bezos is a super politically ideological guy anyway. But when trust in media is at an all-time low, when subscribers are fleeing papers, from both sides, by the way, because they did lose a lot of subscribers over this decision not to endorse, in the hopes that they might gain back subscribers who were maybe not part of the sort of progressive DC base. But they've also been losing conservative subscribers because of the perceived bias of the paper. So they're in this very uncomfortable middle position where no one is thrilled with their coverage or the decisions that they're making. And Bezos is banking on the idea that if he does try to return the paper to some semblance of objectivity, that people are going to come back. I'm not sure that that is the case, but I don't know what the alternative is, because the current course obviously is not conducive to running a newspaper and making revenue and having a large subscriber base.
No, and obviously what Liberals would say about the Washington Post Bezos situation is that they feel that he bent the knee to Trump in the expectation or plausible possibility that Trump was going to win the election, and that it then telegraphed that Trump, who has no compunction at all about putting people under pressure, would be successful in that effort and could alter the editorial line. I think that the Washington Post, like any newspaper, liberal or conservative, has the right to adopt any editorial line that it wishes. I do think that over time people have become less trusting of the idea that there is a division between the editorial pages and the news product, and I think sometimes that is better founded than others. I think, for what it's worth, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal do a better job of keeping those separate than the Washington Post does, because I do think that the Post's news coverage does sometimes lean somewhat liberal. I know conservatives think that about the Times and liberals think that about the Journal. I don't think that in either case so much about their actual news coverage.
I think it about all three of them.
Do you think that the Journal's news coverage leans conservative?
Typically, no, actually.
Right.
I think it is, I would describe it as center-left, but I would say their editorial page is certainly more conservative.
Yeah. I would say that would be putting it quite mildly and diplomatically. I mean, of course, it depends where you stand on the political spectrum. Anyway, we'll get sidetracked in talking about the Wall Street Journal's news coverage. I'm sure the feud between Mr. Musk and Mr. Bezos will go on.
Oh, sure.
But we'll see how they are received. Musk certainly in pole position when it comes to cozying up.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure we're going to continue to cover what's going on with Doge as well. But of course, we have a lot more to cover today on Rising. We're going to take a quick break to be right back.
A hot take just in from conservative commentator Megyn Kelly. The former Fox News anchor is ripping TV hosts for getting too political after the election. The double standard here, Kelly herself spoke at a Trump rally just mere weeks ago.
Kelly made the remarks during an appearance on Sky News Australia, bashing MSNBC Morning Joe co-hosts Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski for meeting with President-elect Trump after he won the election.
Megyn Kelly endorsed Trump just days before that election, hugging him on stage during a rally and branding him as, quote, a protector of women. Now she is criticizing other media personalities for buddying up to the president-elect. Let's take a listen.
He doesn't need them. And of course, I think Trump, too, is happy to see somebody bend the knee, which was fun to see. Bend it. Get down. Nice and low. Pucker up. Lick the boot. And now
Kiss
the backside.
The ring. Kiss
Do
the
it
ring.
again.
Lovingly.
That's the only thing I like about it. Like, lower. On your bellies now. Lick it. Do it. I'm sorry. That's the only thing I'm enjoying about this. And then slither back to your studio and try to tell your audience that you convinced they just elected Hitler and a rapist, that, why wouldn't we talk to him? Now he's worth talking to.
Yeah.
It's about two things. One, their ratings are in the toilet. They've beyond circled the bowl. They've lost half of their audience, and they're doing what they can to generate interest in the show. And Trump is a ratings machine. And so they're excited about the possibility of maybe a Trump interview, which everybody will watch, and they'll be relevant and they'll be talked about again, and they can save their multi-million-dollar contracts because they won't be fired because they'll generate ratings. And the second thing, and I actually think these are in reverse order, because the second thing I think is the most important to these two, and it is the access to power that they crave. And this is what I find so unattractive, Paul. I have the opposite. As soon as anybody starts inviting me like too much into the fold, I repel. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not on anybody's team. Not on your team, not on his team, her team. I'm a journalist. I'm an independent, not putting on anybody's jersey. These two are like, we're out. No. What are we need to do to get up back in? It's like, well, your circle's over here and they lost. So you have to rebuild and you have to say something to your viewers. It's going to make them feel better and show the way forward. No. Our circle has no power. We need to be with the all-powerful one. Oh, maybe he'll pat us on the head. Maybe we'll get to go to a White House state dinner. Maybe we'll matter. Like J-Lo said, you matter. They were listening. That's what they need to be told. You matter. So they had to go and ingratiate themselves with him so they could feel special, like the chosen ones, like the elites. They can't be the losers who don't have access to the sitting president.
Well, I have a lot to say about this, and this may be the thing that we disagree most on today, Amber, because I have lots to say that's critical of Megyn Kelly, but do you wish to offer a preemptive defense?
No, go ahead, and then I'll respond.
Okay. So here's my issue with this. I thought that the Mika and Joe thing was terrible and risible and fundamentally fraudulent because they had gone from when Trump first began running for the president, being kind of his besties, and he was on their show frequently, chit-chatting and having warm conversations. Then they decide that he's this enormous danger to American democracy, and then he wins the election, and they decide he's not, in fact, that big a danger, and let's go down to the court in Mar-a-Lago and pay homage, so we don't lose our access, or so we can boost our ratings, or all of that. I just found the whole thing ridiculous and damaging to their credibility.
So far, so good.
Yes, I figured I'd start with the part that we'd agree on. The problem is, like Megyn Kelly saying, I'm not putting on anyone's jersey. She was speaking at a Trump rally right before the election. Of course she put on his jersey, so to speak. And second of all, if you look at her history of broadcasting, it began, in terms of national prominence with Fox News. At times she was critical of Trump during that stage, but she was a fairly standard Fox News host. Then she remakes herself because NBC handed her a huge check to try to be this kind of daytime female chat show host and remove her own hard edges. And now she becomes clearly a very conservative media commentator, arguing that no, she's standing apart, she's showing her independence, when anyone who has paid even perfunctory interest to her evolution knows that she is not in some fashion charting a middle course or an independent course. She is very much on the pro-conservative and pro-Trump side.
She's definitely conservative, and I would track her journey a little bit differently, and here's what I would say about it, is that when she did go to that daytime talk show host position at NBC, I had the same reaction. I was like, no, Megyn Kelly, like, what you're good at is grilling people, and you're good at digging deep into the news and talking about the heart of the issue, and doing this sort of like goofy dance on TV doesn't comport with your personality. But she never hid the fact that she was conservative when she was doing that show. In fact, one of the reasons she ended up getting fired was because she didn't think it was a huge deal that some reality show star, I forget who it was, had used bronzer to darken their skin to portray a black person for Halloween. She said, look, should she have done it? Probably not, but I think we're all getting a little bit too worked up over this. That was the reason why she was fired. And so my understanding, based on people who know Megyn, was that this was something that really radicalized her in a sense. And so she wanted to be more open about what her views were after that, because she was kind of free in a sense to do that now that she wasn't beholden to a big corporate network. So I don't know that she had like a massive evolution in the sense of running with what was popular at the time, but I think it was more about her personal experiences of being in broadcast media for so long, of being with big corporations, and then kind of being unshackled, right? And so that's how I kind of view it. I agree with you that her phrasing about not putting on the jersey or being independent was a little bit eyebrow raising. The fact that she followed it up with the idea that Mika and Joe are doing this because they want access to Trump is where I kind of fell a little bit back into, okay, I get what she's saying, which is they are bending the knee to Trump in exchange for something, right? Like they want something in return, whether it's Trump being nice to them again, them being friendly, maybe they want an interview. I think when Megyn endorsed Trump on that stage, she wasn't expecting anything in return. I don't think she wants to work in the...
Go on, but it's a very generous interpretation. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it was a surprise endorsement at the last minute. She obviously, at least according so far to the transition picks, is not trying to work in the administration. She's still doing her podcast. I haven't seen any reporting or indication that she is trying to work for Trump. So I don't view this as the same kind of favor trading that's being done by the Morning Joe team. And I think if Megyn Kelly were lobbying for a transition position, that would probably be reported by now.
No, I mean, I'm not saying that she's looking for a position within the administration, but I do think that she has, generally speaking, shifted herself to greater proximity to Trump world and to much less hostility or even just generally holding him to journalistic account. I mean, it was Megyn Kelly, of course, who asked the famous question at the debate about comments that Trump had made about women. Then Trump subsequently suggested that she had asked those questions because she was menstruating. And now she's like his best friend and thinks he is a protector of women. I think that is just inevitably a move to make yourself more comfortable or closer to
But what
power.
if she really believes it? I mean, she could be speaking from an actual sincere place that she thinks Trump was the best pick for president.
No, she could. But here's the issue that I have with that, Amber. It is possible that she could. It is also possible that Mika Brzezinski really thinks that it is time to set a new tone in national politics, and that's why she went with Joe Scarborough to Mar-a-Lago. Except, I think if we are being intellectually honest, we have to accept that both those things are highly implausible. And the problem that I have a lot of the time with a certain brand, and I'm not accusing you of this, but a certain brand of people in the sort of Trump kind of Elon podcaster world, is that it seems to me they are very, very skeptical of the explanations given by liberal-leaning people for various things. And that is fine if they want to be skeptical of Joe Scarborough or skeptical of other media personalities or whatever. But then they extend the most enormous level of credulousness toward anyone who will, in fact, put on the red cap and be Make America Great Again, and leave themselves open, in my view, to all kinds of opportunists and grifters who just, say, yay, Trump more often.
I do think the time frame that these evolutions occurred over matters, though. Megyn Kelly, in that debate, that was in 2015, I believe, or 2016. So we're talking about almost a decade. And I can say, with a lot of personal experience, that a lot of people in the Republican Party and on the conservative side were deeply suspicious of Trump in 2016. A lot of them outright hated him. But they came around during his first term because they saw that he wasn't what the media sold him as. He actually had a really great first term for a lot of conservative priorities. And they joined the Trump train, for lack of a better term. And that was a sincere, I think, shift in the party based on the fact that they felt like they had been sold a lot of lies about what Trump was going to do and who he was. Morning Joe, it's only been a month since they called him a fascist. I mean, don't you think that the time frame matters in terms of how quickly the switch flipped?
Well, but you see, I think the time frame matters in lots of things, and I think the time frame matters when Megyn Kelly is saying, I'm not putting on anybody's jersey within a month of appearing
We're in
at a
agreement
Trump rally.
on that
Right.
her language there was not right.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should leave it at a point. One point of agreement in the Megyn Kelly matter. We will have lots to either agree or disagree about. We'll keep you in suspense, and we'll have a lot more topics to talk about on Rising right after this.
HBO is uncanceling J.K. Rowling. The television network is saying it is greenlighting a Harry Potter series, and it could benefit from the author's involvement. Shocker. I think it would.
The author of the Harry Potter and Fantastic Beasts series has made some controversial, to say the least, comments in the past about transgender people. Those statements have caused rifts between Rowling and the actors who starred in the Harry Potter films and the series' fan base.
And now HBO, whose parent company Warner Brothers once condemned Rowling, has now come to her defense, saying that she has a right to express her personal views.
Rowling has made her beliefs on the transgender issue a focal point of her online presence, and now users are voicing their concerns online. One ex-user writing, for example, quote, "So, who else is cancelling their Max subscriptions today?"
Other users, though, are praising HBO, saying that the woke movement has absolutely peaked. Good to see these institutions begin to see the light. And also, HBO finally understands there is a larger non-woke audience.
Well, Amber, what do you make of all of this? The J.K. Rowling obviously has been a lightning rod, or whatever you want to term it, for a long time on this particular topic. What do you think?
I mean, I thought it was strange that she was canceled in the first place. I actually didn't find her comments that controversial. Surprise, surprise. She actually is probably more moderate than a lot of conservatives on the transgender issue because her focus is solely on protecting women's private spaces. She has made very clear that she has transgender people that she knows and that she respects, that she doesn't have any issue with the ideology itself, but that she feels like women's bathrooms, locker rooms, etc. should be for biological women only. And she has been pretty unwavering in the face of relentless attacks from transgender activists on this issue. And I appreciate that she is not continuing to be divorced from a concept that she literally created out of her own cloth for the sake of appeasing this small minority of people.
Mm-hmm. So on the J.K. Rowling issue and indeed the broader trans issue, I tend to be a little bit tentative because it is a topic that people, as we both know, get enormously impassioned about, and there are very strong advocates on both sides. I know in general broad contours what J.K. Rowling's views are, and you've mentioned the issue of women's spaces and safety and all of that. The reason I am hesitant about it is that I'm not someone who knows, which of the 2,000 J.K. Rowling tweets is the most offensive, or who she got into a debate with online and all of that. Myself and our friend Robbie were discussing the trans issue earlier on this week, and, my basic point is people should have the right as adults to identify as they wish and to be treated fairly and with dignity. Where there are other rights that are in conflict with that, whether to do with the sports issue or the safety issue, then I think that becomes much more difficult, and the objections can certainly be legitimate and are not inherently transphobic. All of that being said, the cancel, I do get the sense that what is called cancel culture is possibly fading a little bit. There were people, on this issue, Dave Chappelle, for example, got a lot of criticism. And there were, I remember there being a protest outside Netflix, I think, about him and a special. And, he seems to have survived perfectly well. I do wonder if one's capacity to survive is really a function of one's level of ability or talent, rather than the issue of the gravity of the purported offense. Chappelle is in my view, one of the best stand-up comics in the world, so it's much more difficult to cancel him than it is some sort of middle-ranking person who might say something offensive, and there's a more concerted push against. J.K. Rowling's success, commercial success as an author, doesn't need any further comment from me. It's very self-evident.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and it's one of the reasons why, although it seems like cancel culture is fading to an extent, another example would be Joe Rogan. A lot of people tried to cancel his podcast. Then he got a, $100 million deal with Spotify and is the #1 podcast in the world. No matter how many people say that they're going to boycott him, he ends up coming out ahead of all of that. But again, same thing, huge profile, a lot of power and a lot of allyships in the media space that want to see him succeed. So it's okay, those people survived and that's great, but what about the people who are just working in a company and somebody takes something they say the wrong way and they lose their job because the company is terrified of a lawsuit and the culture is super fraught? Those people don't have the same resources or platform that celebrities do to withstand these kind of attacks. So I hope that it is the case that this cancel culture trend fading at the top trickles down to the bottom, for lack of a better metaphor.
Yeah, I think that's an entirely fair point, and I wouldn't really argue against that in any substantive way. I guess as with so many things, a lot depends on the specifics of it, right? Because people, I think, get entangled in the issue of free speech rights, which are actually the rights for the government not to take action against you, right? And in a workplace, there are things that you could say that would be clearly offensive, and an employer has the right to take action on those things. You couldn't go around racially abusing people, and I think we would both agree that that is a fair and, in fact, important distinction and condition to have. So some of this does come down to where one draws the line rather than an absolutist cancel culture is good or cancel culture is bad type of scenario, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, it does matter on what the person did, but when I think about cancel culture, one of its defining traits in my mind is that the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And so it's necessarily, it doesn't fit into cancel culture when someone gets just consequence that matches what they did. But when you're talking about people losing an entire career because they made an off-color joke, or because in Dave Chappelle's case, they tried to ruin his career because he made jokes about trans people, to me, that's the punishment doesn't fit the crime, and that's when it constitutes cancel culture.
And yeah, I mean, I think it does become more fraught in workplace scenarios because, I mean, the advantage of the Chappelles or the J.K. Rowlings or the Joe Rogans of the world is they're not really dependent on employers. I mean, of course, Dave Chappelle gets a lot of money from Netflix if he does a special, and Joe Rogan gets massive amounts of money from Spotify. But if Spotify say, no, you're unacceptable, he has such a big audience that he can go to whatever the other, podcast platform is. And I do think that's where it becomes more difficult in the workplace, because obviously somebody, doing a normal job that their income isn't based upon a personal following that they have developed. I think that's the issue.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a lot harder for them to be insulated from the effects of losing a job or otherwise having an income stream get taken away from them. I think that's definitely true. And I also just wanted to mention this before we go, because I think it's another example of the normalization of things that would have been considered really out of bounds just maybe 4 years ago, which is we see all of these professional athletes now doing the Trump dance. You have Christian Pulisic of the U.S. men's soccer team, members of the San Francisco 49ers, including Nick Bosa, a female British golfer, Charlie Hall, on the LPGA tour, all celebrating with this. And it's like, obviously they're not endorsing Trump, but the fact that you're allowed to do something Trump adjacent and not get in trouble for it now, I think is a really good sign that our politics is becoming a little bit less fraught.
Talking of doing things Trump adjacent like that dance, you and Robbie in that seat have both done the Trump dance. There will be no Trump dancing from this side of the desk, but Amber has the right to dance as she wishes. We'll be back with more dancing and more talking after this.
Is America ready for a female president? This is the narrative that keeps coming back, and this time it's from someone who had a vested interest in seeing a woman in the Oval Office. Oh boy. Former President Bill Clinton has an interesting take here. In an interview with CBS's Tracy Smith on Tuesday, Bill Clinton talked about his new book, Citizen, and also reflected upon the ways this country has changed over the years. Let's watch.
Do you think part of the issue is that America is just not ready for a female president?
Maybe. I think in some ways we've moved to the right as a reaction to all the turmoil. Yeah, I think if Hillary had been nominated in 2008, she would have walked in just like Obama did.
Has the country changed?
Well, I think all these cultural battles we're fighting make it harder in some ways for a woman to win.
So you think it has more to do with party than gender?
No. Although I think it would probably be easier for a conservative Republican woman to win.
Than a Democrat woman.
Because, I mean, that's what Maggie Thatcher did. But I still think we'll have a female president pretty soon.
You do?
I do.
How soon? Within your lifetime?
Well, oh yeah. Well, I don't know how long I'm going to live. You're asking an old man that question.
In a separate interview with MSNBC, Clinton had some advice for the Democrats post their November 5th loss. Let's watch that.
Politics is the only business in which you can prove your authenticity by not knowing anything. And I think that's a problem. And we'll pay for it unless we get over it. But that's a problem for the Democrats too. We have to learn to talk to people in ways that they can relate to.
Well, a lot here yet again, Amber, including Bill Clinton's desire to see a woman in the Oval Office, which caused some off-camera chuckling here, but we assume that is a reference to Hillary Clinton back in 2008. People have whatever feelings they have about Bill Clinton. The argument, I think, that the people who typically break those kind of identity barriers are often conservative, that the conservative person is often the first, I think that has some legitimacy to it. I mean, he cited the example of Margaret Thatcher in the UK. Rishi Sunak, a conservative, recently became the first non-white Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And I think there is an argument that that when those barriers are being broken, any resistance to it in the electorate is more easily overcome by a conservative than by a liberal or progressive candidate. So, you know, we can get into, I suspect, our divergent views of Bill Clinton, but as a theory, as a thesis, that seems plausible to me at least.
Yeah, it seems plausible. I think the only thing that cuts against that is that you still do see more Democratic female elected officials in Congress than you do Republican female elected officials. But on the executive level, it is the case that there have been a lot of female firsts that were put in by Trump, not by the Democrats. I mean, Pam Bondi, I believe, will be the first female attorney general. Kellyanne Conway was the first female to run a successful presidential campaign back in 2016. And he even nominated the first woman to be a CIA director because even women can waterboard people, right? It's
nothing to be proud of, Amber, but anyway,
I know, that's the point.
Advocacies of torture,
right.
in the name of gender equality.
No, that's exactly my point, is it's not really something to be proud of. But yeah, I mean, there were quite a few that I'm not thinking of at the moment, but I mean, there's like this disconnect, right, where Trump is picking a lot of women to represent him publicly or to be members of the cabinet, and did so the first time around. All of his press secretaries, with the exception of Sean Spicer, were female. But then on the senatorial and congressional level, you have actually a disparity between Democratic and Republican elected officials. So what does that really say? And is it the case that the first female president could be a conservative rather than a Democrat, as most people assume? I actually agree with his assessment on that that's far more likely.
Yeah, no, I think it possibly is more likely. With the Trump thing, you know, I take the point about appointments and members of his previous administration, and I think that was why there was such heavy backlash against, wasn't it Mark Cuban who said in the closing days of the election
that
something?
He didn't surround himself with strong women.
With strong women. Mm-hmm. Now, then you go, you take the counter argument to that, which is the things that Trump has said, this idea that he would protect women whether they want it or not, which was that bizarre quote in the end, and all the allegations that have been made by various women against him of misconduct of one kind or another. The point about the women at the executive level is whether it is actually an electoral disadvantage at that level to be a woman or not, because the two examples that we have had of nominees have been obviously Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, and they both lost to Trump. And that then opens the question, is that a function of sexism or misogyny, or a function of their policy platform, or a function of their quality, for want of a better word, as politicians?
And that's the issue, because I don't think either of them were particularly great candidates. Kamala worse than Hillary for sure. I mean, Hillary Clinton, I think, is a smart individual, obviously. She made some really key fatal errors in her campaign that were obviously completely unrelated to gender, such as not campaigning as much in the battleground states as she probably should have. Kamala Harris didn't have much of a policy platform to speak of, and did a very inconsistent at best job of explaining some of the changes of her policy positions from 2019 to 2024. And so I thought she was a very weak candidate. So I don't think either of them are great case studies as to whether or not their gender was the reason why they lost, when there are so many very obvious reasons why they did that were about things like policy, campaign strategy, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Clinton's people believe that it was part of it, and the whole shattering the glass ceiling that never shattered. This is an odd role reversal. I think I'm probably more of a Hillary Clinton skeptic than you are, but from a different perspective. But to that point, let me, before we finish this, finish this segment, get back to a long-time grievance I have had with Bill Clinton,
Let's hear
which
it.
goes back to the 2008 campaign, but the reason I mention it is that it resurfaced there. Bill Clinton has a peculiar and, I think, unseemly habit of denigrating Barack Obama. President Obama, I guess I should say. And in that interview, or the clip that we just played, he said, if Hillary had been nominated in 2008, she would have walked in just like Obama did. And the implication there is that then candidate Obama just sort of showed up in favorable circumstances and the election was as good as in the bag. And I mean, I covered that campaign closely. That's not the case at all. And to your point about talented politicians, I think that even people ideologically opposed to Barack Obama would acknowledge that he is in fact a very talented politician and very talented campaigner. And Clinton's propensity to disparage him in these with these little sly digs annoys me. So
why do you think that is? Is there maybe some resentment over Obama taking over the DNC structure, or what is that?
I think there are a lot of resentments during that 2008 campaign. Firstly, Bill Clinton, made all sorts of weird comments suggesting that Obama was basically winning because he was black, and that was the only reason. And then Obama had gave an interview during that campaign where he implied that Ronald Reagan and somebody else had been a transformative president, and he left Bill Clinton out of that list. It was like, oh, Clinton was just whatever. And Bill Clinton apparently took umbrage at that. But it is just such a long-running thing. I remember, this is going back a long time, I think it was in 2010, The Guardian in Britain were asking people to write about something, or someone or something about which they had changed their mind. And I wrote about the Clintons, who I had been favourable to, before that. They were very involved in the Irish peace process and so forth. But their conduct in that campaign against Obama was, in my opinion, pretty disgraceful, honestly. And, I see Bill going on with that, belittling, as I would see it.
A lot of bad blood there, huh?
Exactly. Yeah.
All right.
So, anyway.
We have a lot more to cover today on Rising, so stick around. We'll be right back.
What kind of car would you prefer to drive, a Jaguar or a Volvo? The reason this matters is that a debate is erupting on social media. In one corner is the luxury brand automaker. This all started after Jaguar posted this ad. Let's watch.
Now, the sturdy Volvo has clapped back with an ad that the carmaker originally released in September. The video for the company's new fully electric SUV, the X90, features themes of fatherhood, motherhood, and protection. Let's play some of that.
Why are you scared?
About it all, the nights, the responsibility, we're gonna need a bigger place.
Help with all that.
I know, bless you, you're so sweet. I've got this feeling that we're gonna have a daughter, just as stubborn as her mum.
Oh, hopefully not. The family's loud.
Now that's a legacy she might have to live with. We like Naya.
pro-family, to be sure.
Jaguar's new ad got lots of criticism from the right. Even SpaceX's Elon Musk joined the tussle. He wrote, "Do you sell cars?" Jaguar replied, "Yes, we'd love to show you. Join us for a cuppa," good British word, in Miami on 2nd of December. Warmest regards, Jaguar. Also, media personality Andrew Tate tweeted, oh Lord, quote, "This is gay BS. I have 76 cars. I do not own a Jag, and now I never will," unquote. I don't know why we're quoting that guy, but anyway, there he is. And Virginia State Delegate Nick Freitas posted, "Well, we know where the advertising team for Bud Light went," unquote, referring to Bud Light's 2023 ad with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney.
Others on X are writing that they want to sell their Jaguars, and many are posting hashtag boycott Jaguar. And Jaguar's stock prices just took a hit. According to a tweet put out by the Joe Rogan podcast, quote, "Jaguar's stock price tumbles amid woke ad backlash." All right, let's get into it. So first of all, I will say that I didn't think either of the ads were that great because they didn't show the cars enough. But I did watch, I mean, Jaguar didn't show it at all.
Right.
Volvo at least had some, shots of it rolling down the street.
Sure.
But I will say, when I watched this Jaguar ad, I went, what the hell is this? I mean, what was your reaction when you first saw it?
Well, my reaction was that it was an obvious, very profound attempt to change what I perceive to be their brand identity. Now, even though I've lived here for 20 years, you're going to have to tell me if Jaguar has a different identity here than it does in Britain or Ireland. In Britain or Ireland, Jaguar is a brand that's sort of rich, older man, investment banker type vehicle if he doesn't want to drive a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, right?
Yeah.
And this ad is clearly attempting to make it cooler and hipper and more, it's a very, there's people, seemingly trans people in the ad and a lot of people of different ethnicities in the ad. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it is just that it has created this backlash because it is so, I think, out of keeping with what people had perceived the Jaguar brand to be. And of course, it has now got involved in this whole debate about quote-unquote wokeness.
Yeah, exactly. This, I think, struck people so much because it's very antithetical to the brand, and it seems like brand suicide to try to make this massive shift without clearly a decent marketing team behind it. And I think it's also a miscalculation of where the culture is going because, I mean, we talked about this in previous segments. You see pro athletes doing the Trump dance. Young people broke towards Trump this election cycle. There's been numerous articles about the trends that young people are embracing. It's things like quiet luxury, clean girl, barber jackets are coming back in for young people. So it's this idea of what Jaguar used to symbolize, which is wealth that's not being shown in an ostentatious way. And this is the exact opposite of that. And I think whoever came up with this really misread the cultural moment, and that's why people are reacting so negatively, because it's like, who on your team thought that this was what people wanted to see right now and that this is what's attracting customers?
Yeah, I mean, I get that brands in the car industry or anywhere else do sometimes want to change their brand. Lincoln, when I was first living in the US, had a rather stodgy image and has, I think, changed that image in a positive way, or to at least be a sort of more stylish car brand than it was seen, 10 or 15 years ago. I mean, Jaguar has clearly decided to embrace this moment of whatever they want, boldness, let's say, for a better term, whether people want to call it woke or not, to try to make itself more fashionable. It is, I think, it's fine for car manufacturers or anybody else to try to do that. Whether it works or not is a very different question. And one of the things that, of course, makes it more difficult for it to work is that it gets sucked into this issue of people, trying to boost their own social media clout by just blasting them for it. Having said all that, I actually liked the Volvo ad, which I know it has been, the idea of it being for life at the end is sort of like, I know that gets serviced into the whole abortion debate, which I think is, again, a little unfair, honestly.
Yeah, it's more about safety standards.
Exactly.
That's how I read it.
And to the point about branding, that's been sort of Volvo's watchword for my entire life. It's an ad so long that I feel that we shouldn't say a spoiler of what the twist in the tale is, but it's about 4 minutes long, and it's a good piece of filmmaking.
Yeah, it is. It's a little long for my taste, but I assume this was built for social media or YouTube as opposed to actually a television commercial. But yeah, I mean, I think it's smart because if you're thinking about the different groups of people that are purchasing cars, you have the wealthy class who want to buy something that is a little stylish and has more luxury features, which is where Jaguar would normally be. Then you have sort of the flashy group that likes the Lamborghinis and the Porsches and those kind of cars, which seems to be what Jaguar is now trying to appeal to, but in a strange way, and I think probably not in keeping with what that group actually wants to see in a vehicle. And then you have people who are buying for practical reasons. A lot of people buying for families. One of the things that I'm thinking about as a recently married woman is if we have 2 cars right now, if one of them, takes a hit and we have to buy a new vehicle, thinking about something that's going to be safe, reliable, have enough space for kiddos in the future. And so this would be an ad that would really appeal to someone like me as I'm searching for that next car. And certainly people who are expanding their family are going to look at this and say, yeah, I've got toddlers in the back. The safety feature is actually the number one thing that I'm buying based off of. So it's just a question of who is your audience and how are you going to appeal to them. Jaguar clearly missed the boat incredibly. Volvo, I think, hit it nail on.
Yeah, and the Volvo...
Bang on.
Exactly. The Volvo ad, to your point, cast that argument or that brand strength for safety in very emotional terms. Like, it's actually quite a moving ad to watch, and I hate being moved by ads because I know at the end of the day they're trying to sell me a product, and then Budweiser does some like puppy Super Bowl ad, and I'm like, oh, it's like if they're only trying to sell beer at the end of the day or sell Volvos. But it is, it's an effective, as I say, piece of filmmaking. I kind of wish we weren't in a moment where all these things didn't get dragged into the broader social debates, but we are, and that's the world that we live in.
It is indeed. And the world we live in is also taking us to the weekend, and that's going to do it for us today on Rising. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.